universe is over 13 billion years old. Our galaxy alone contains billions of planets that could support life. The numbers are undeniable. Intelligent aliens should be everywhere. So why, when we listen to the cosmos, do we hear only static? Why, when we look into the void, does nothing look back? One terrifying theory provides an answer. It doesn't suggest that we're alone. It suggests the exact opposite, that we are surrounded, that advanced civilizations know we're here, and they have made a conscious, universal decision to leave us completely and utterly alone. This is the zoo hypothesis. Any modern discussion about extraterrestrial life eventually collides with the subject of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, now more officially known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. These sightings, reports, and videos have intrigued and divided the public for decades. Some are easy to debunk: weather balloons, drones, experimental aircraft. Others remain stubbornly unexplained. But what if some of these phenomena aren't mistakes, hoaxes, or illusions? What if they are intentional appearances, brief glimmers of the observers from the zoo hypothesis? Supporters of this idea argue that the occasional UFO encounter may serve as a kind of soft contact, just enough to hint at a greater intelligence without revealing it outright. These sightings might be tests, not of our technology, but of our psychology. How do we react to the unknown? Do we panic? Do we investigate? Do we turn to superstition, or do we apply reason? The history of modern UFO sightings is rich and complex. In 1947, the so-called Roswell incident ignited the public imagination when reports of a crashed flying disc in New Mexico led to widespread speculation about alien contact. Official explanations ranged from weather balloons to classified projects. Still, the idea stuck, and in many minds, Roswell became a turning point. Some believe it marked the beginning of a new phase in our relationship with the Watchers. Since then, thousands of UFO sightings have been documented across the globe, with varying degrees of credibility. In recent years, even the US government has acknowledged the existence of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Pentagon's 2020 release of military footage showing craft that defy conventional physics raised eyebrows and questions. If these objects are real and not from Earth, what are they doing here? Observing us? Studying us? Reminding us they exist? This intermittent visibility fits neatly within the framework of the zoo hypothesis. The Watchers don't fully reveal themselves, but they let us know from time to time that they're there. Of course, skepticism is warranted. UFO culture is filled with misinformation, flawed interpretations, and outright disinformation. But amid the noise, the question remains: if a highly advanced alien civilization wanted to observe us without making full contact, what would it look like? Exactly what we're seeing: fleeting appearances, mysterious craft, radar blips, glimpses, nothing definitive, just enough to keep us guessing. Ancient encounters. Were the Watchers always here? UFO sightings aren't a purely modern phenomenon. Throughout human history, there have been strange reports, visions of lights in the sky, fire-breathing chariots, winged beings descending from the heavens. Could these be early accounts of the same Watchers the zoo hypothesis describes? Some researchers and alternative historians believe that ancient texts, artworks, and myths may contain encoded memories of contact with advanced beings. The Sumerian gods, the Vimanas of ancient India, the sky beings of Native American lore, all speak of powerful entities who came from above, imparted knowledge, and then left. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes a vision of wheels within wheels in the sky, with beings of fire and metal descending to speak with him. While religious interpretations abound, some see this as an early record of a technological encounter. Of course, mainstream historians caution against retrofitting ancient accounts to fit modern narratives. Symbolism, mythology, and metaphor were the language of ancient civilizations. But still, the similarities are striking. Why do so many disconnected cultures across space and time describe such similar heavenly visitors? The zoo hypothesis allows for a compelling interpretation. The Watchers were never absent. They've been here all along, intervening occasionally, appearing to select individuals, then retreating back into silence. This leads to another possibility, that ancient gods were never divine in the religious sense. but technologically superior observers, engaging with humanity during key developmental moments. Perhaps they gave us fire, taught us farming, or shaped early languages, not to control us, but to give us a push towards self-sufficiency. Once again, we see echoes of the zookeeper's role, not a master, not an invader, but a distant guide. Government secrecy. Are the gatekeepers gatekeeping? For decades, governments around the world, particularly the US, have been accused of hiding the truth about extraterrestrial life. Secret files, black budget programs, strange encounters by military pilots. All these form a tapestry of conspiracy, skepticism, and intrigue. Within the zoo hypothesis framework, such secrecy might make sense. If governments have reason to believe that we are being watched by a superior intelligence, they might. Avoid panic by withholding the truth. Protect strategic advantage, keeping alien knowledge or even wreckage to themselves. Honor a non-interference pact if the aliens themselves have made it clear that open contact is premature or forbidden. It's worth considering that if a species capable of interstellar travel were observing us, they would also be observing our governments and perhaps even communicating with them discreetly. A kind of galactic back channel might already exist. There's historical precedent for this sort of discretion. In the 1960s, the US Air Force launched Project Blue Book to investigate UFO sightings. While the official conclusion was that none posed a national security threat, many believe the real findings were either buried or never disclosed publicly. More recently, the Pentagon established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, and released multiple official statements acknowledging unexplained aerial phenomena. The fact that governments are now openly talking about the unexplained suggests a shift in tone, perhaps preparing the public for a future reveal. Still, the majority of information remains classified, and while secrecy can be frustrating, it may also reflect a broader understanding. We're not ready yet, or at least, the full truth, whatever it is, requires careful management. After all, how do you tell 8 billion people they're part of an interstellar petri dish? Layers of the hypothesis beyond the zoo. One of the most compelling features of the zoo hypothesis is its flexibility. It isn't just a single idea, it's a framework with many possible layers and implications. Here are some of the deeper layers to consider. 1. The reserve hypothesis. Perhaps Earth is not just being watched, it's protected. A cosmic nature reserve, preserved from galactic colonization, mining, or exploitation. Other civilizations may have been told, or agreed, to leave Earth untouched, its unique evolutionary trajectory deemed too important to interfere with. This version paints Earth not as a zoo in the traditional sense, but as a rare garden. 2. The experiment hypothesis. In another layer, we might not be entirely natural. Perhaps life on Earth was seeded intentionally, a long-term experiment in cultural and biological evolution. That would make us less like animals in a zoo and more like subjects in a long-running simulation. Are the watchers scientists, philosophers, artists? Do they see humanity as art, data, or something else entirely? 3. The test hypothesis. And what if we're being tested? What if our moral decisions, our use of technology, or even our response to potential alien signals are all part of a cosmic evaluation? If we pass, we join the galactic community. If we fail, we're left to continue developing or to destroy ourselves. This interpretation gives the zoo hypothesis a deeply existential weight. It suggests that we are being judged, not in the religious sense, but by our actions and choices as a species. Cosmic silence revisited. Is it really so quiet? After all this speculation, we return to the core mystery, the silence. And yet, maybe it's not silence. Maybe it's a quiet conversation taking place above and beyond our current level of awareness. Imagine a child who hasn't yet learned to read. Books surround them, full of meaning, history, and stories. But to them, it's just ink on paper. What if alien civilizations are broadcasting constantly, just not in formats we can perceive? Maybe contact won't come through radio waves or lasers. Maybe it'll arrive as an idea, a vision, a quantum imprint, or something even stranger. We're looking outward, but perhaps the message is already within us. The zoo hypothesis asks us to question everything: our tools, our assumptions, our place in the universe. And perhaps most importantly, it asks us to consider the possibility that we are not waiting for contact. We are becoming worthy of it. Visions of first contact, the futures we might face. If the zoo hypothesis is correct, and we are under the silent scrutiny of alien intelligences, the natural question becomes, what happens next? What does first contact look like when it's the Watchers who decide when and if it occurs? Let's explore a few visions of the future, based on how contact could unfold under the zoo framework. Scenario 1, the peaceful introduction. In this ideal future, contact is initiated not with fear or dominance, but with diplomacy and mutual respect. Perhaps we receive a signal, calm, structured, unmistakably intelligent. It contains a simple message: you're not alone. You've been watched. You are now ready. Such a message wouldn't be a threat. It would be an invitation. The aliens would offer to share knowledge, communicate with our scientists, and gradually introduce us to the wider galactic community. They might send probes, not ships. They'd use universal symbols, math, physics, music, to build common ground. The world's reaction would be mixed at first: shock, wonder, skepticism. But slowly, as the realization sets in, humanity might rise to meet the moment. Nations might unite. Resources might be pooled for global dialogue. Our petty differences would pale in the shadow of such a revelation. This peaceful contact scenario aligns with the most optimistic version of the zoo hypothesis, that the Watchers are waiting until we're no longer a danger to ourselves or others. Once we demonstrate maturity, they step forward, not to rule us, but to welcome us. Scenario 2, the quiet integration. Another possibility is that contact doesn't come with a signal or a spaceship or a news headline, but with a whisper. In this future, aliens begin to integrate slowly into our world, not physically, but informationally. They share insights via encrypted messages, dreams, or sudden scientific inspiration. Individuals, scientists, artists, visionaries, begin to receive breakthroughs that change the world. Clean energy, cures for disease, interstellar physics. The source of these breakthroughs is never confirmed. It becomes an open secret. Something is helping us, but it's not human. This scenario imagines the Watchers as mentors, operating from the shadows, nudging us toward progress without disturbing our agency. It's subtle, elegant, and deeply in line with the ethics of non-interference. Over generations, this quiet guidance leads to massive social and technological transformation. Eventually, humanity becomes spacefaring, and perhaps only then does formal contact occur as peers among the stars. Scenario 3, the shockwave. Of course, not all versions of contact are peaceful or gradual. What if the Watchers decide that waiting isn't working? What if Earth is on the brink of irreversible catastrophe, nuclear war, ecological collapse, AI takeover, and the Watchers intervene? They arrive abruptly. Massive ships, undeniable presence. Not to conquer, but to stop us, to impose order where we've failed. This dystopian scenario feels jarring, but it's not unthinkable. From their perspective, stepping in may be the only way to prevent the extinction of a developing civilization. The consequences would be enormous. Governments might fall, societies would be forced to reorganize, resistance would arise, but in the long run, it could lead to survival, a bitter kind of salvation. This version of the zoo hypothesis sees us less as animals in a preserve and more as patients in a quarantine ward. Intervention is a last resort. Scenario 4, the indifferent abandonment. Perhaps the most unsettling scenario is this: they never come. We destroy ourselves through war, greed, or environmental ruin. The Watchers observe but do nothing. Our downfall becomes just another failed experiment in the cosmic database. No contact, no rescue, just silence. This version of the zoo hypothesis doesn't reflect hostility, but cold detachment. Advanced civilizations, having seen countless species rise and fall, might no longer mourn collapse. They might wait for another species, another chance. This is the future we must avoid. If we are being watched, we must ask, what are we showing them? The path forward, how humanity earns its place. If we assume the zoo hypothesis has truth to it, that there are beings watching, waiting, evaluating, then what can we do about it? Is there a way to signal that we're ready, to graduate from exhibit to explorer? The answer isn't in our technology, it's in our behavior. 1. Global unity. The first and most obvious sign of readiness is unity. A fragmented planet, divided by war and ideology, is unlikely to gain the trust of a superior intelligence. Why would anyone invite chaos into a peaceful interstellar community? Humanity must learn to cooperate across borders, cultures, and systems, not perfectly, but meaningfully. The development of global institutions, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and shared planetary goals are strong signals that we've moved beyond our primitive tribalism. 2. Environmental stewardship. From the outside, Earth is a jewel in the blackness of space, but we are poisoning it. A civilization that can't even protect its own biosphere is not ready to join a galactic family. We must show that we can live in harmony with our planet, that we value sustainability, balance, and the future. Climate action, conservation, and renewable innovation are not just necessary for us, they might be the very test being administered by the Watchers. 3. Ethical maturity. It's not enough to be smart, we must also be wise. How we treat each other, how we treat animals, the weak, the vulnerable, may reflect how we treat other life forms. Would we enslave? Would we exploit? Or would we seek understanding? Ethical maturity means cultivating compassion, justice, and empathy. A civilization that values life, all life, sends a powerful message to anyone watching. We are no longer a danger. 4. Cosmic curiosity. Finally, we must continue to look upward, not with fear, but with wonder. The search for life must continue. SETI, METI, and all their successors must not give up, even when the silence feels endless. Because in the act of searching, we show our intent. We demonstrate that we're not just waiting, we're trying, we're reaching out with hope. And maybe, just maybe, they're watching to see if we keep trying. The human advantage, our messy, beautiful potential. Let's take a moment to reframe the narrative. What if we're not being excluded because we're dangerous, but because we're incredible? What if the Watchers see something in us that is rare, raw, and beautiful? Our art, our music, our creativity, our resilience, our ability to imagine, to dream, to rise from tragedy and keep going. Maybe they're not avoiding us. Maybe they're protecting something precious, our potential. Other civilizations might be older, wiser, more technologically advanced, but perhaps they've lost something we still have. Wonder, the thrill of discovering, of building, of failing and trying again. Perhaps that's what makes us worth watching. And perhaps that's what will one day make us worth welcoming. Why we want to be watched. The psychology behind the hypothesis. At its core, the zoo hypothesis raises a subtle but powerful emotional question. Do we want to be watched? And if so, why? This is more than just curiosity about aliens. There's something deeply human about the desire to be observed by something greater than ourselves. Whether we call them gods, spirits, angels, ancestors, or extraterrestrials, we often imagine intelligent beings who see us even when we cannot see them. That's not just science fiction, that's psychology. We are social creatures. From infancy, our development is shaped by how others perceive us. Recognition is validating. Observation affirms that we exist, that we matter. And perhaps, in some unconscious way, the idea of alien watchers serves that same function on a cosmic scale. The zoo hypothesis can even be comforting. It suggests that we're not alone, not forgotten, not insignificant, that someone, somewhere, knows we're here. In a universe so vast and silent, that idea carries weight. To be watched, gently, patiently, is to be seen, and being seen is a deeply human need. But there's a flip side to this emotional coin. If aliens are observing us, it also implies judgment. The Watchers aren't just curious, they may be evaluating, and that can be deeply unsettling. Are we good enough? Are we passing the test? What if we're failing? These questions strike at the heart of our collective insecurities as a species. For all our intelligence, we're still fragile, divided, flawed. The zoo hypothesis forces us to confront that. In this way, it acts like a cosmic mirror, reflecting back not what aliens are, but who we are. The Watchers in culture, from myth to sci-fi. Long before telescopes, satellites, or SETI, humans told stories about being watched from above. In nearly every culture, we find myths of sky beings, divine or otherworldly figures who descend from the heavens, offer wisdom, issue warnings, or vanish mysteriously. Sometimes they bring fire or language. Sometimes they judge humanity's behavior. Often, they return to the stars. Sound familiar? These ancient myths could be interpreted as the first stirrings of the zoo hypothesis in human consciousness. Even without a scientific framework, early civilizations may have intuited the possibility of higher intelligences keeping an eye on Earth. Fast forward to modern times, and we see this theme resurface in science fiction. From the monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey, to the Vulcans in Star Trek, alien watchers are everywhere. They hide in the background, appear at crucial moments, or observe silently until humanity is ready. These stories resonate because they reflect something we already suspect, that our story is being witnessed by someone greater. In H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, the alien invaders are not benevolent watchers, they're colonizers. Yet even this grim tale underscores a core idea. We are not the only actors in the cosmic drama. Others are watching, and they might act. From Marvel's Watchers to ancient gods perched in the sky, the idea of cosmic observation is baked into our cultural DNA. Even conspiracy theories, however misguided, stem from the same root. They assume that someone knows more than we do, that someone is watching events unfold behind the scenes. Whether it's the government, aliens, or interdimensional beings, the pattern is consistent. The zoo hypothesis isn't just a scientific idea, it's a story structure, one that we return to again and again, because at the deepest level, it feels true. Modern echoes. Technology as a mirror of the hypothesis. Today, we live under constant surveillance, from satellites, data tracking software, smartphones, and smart devices. Ironically, we've become so used to being watched by our own creations that the concept of being observed by aliens feels less science fiction and more plausible than ever. We've normalized surveillance, but here's the twist. We are also becoming watchers. As our telescopes peer deeper into space and our AI systems analyze exoplanet data, we're stepping into the role once reserved for the hypothetical aliens. We're scanning the skies for signs of life. We're building digital zoos of information, Earth-like planets, atmospheric compositions, signs of biological activity. What does that say about us? It says that the zoo hypothesis may not be an alien construct at all. It may be a universal behavior of intelligent species. The moment a civilization gains the ability to observe from afar, it does, not to interfere, but to understand. Maybe we're not unique. Maybe every advanced species, upon reaching a certain threshold, chooses the path of silent observation, watching for signs of life elsewhere, waiting to make contact only when the time is right. If that's true, then the zoo hypothesis isn't just a possibility, it's a probability. A cosmic mirror, what are we showing the universe? Whether or not alien watchers exist, the zoo hypothesis invites us to act as if they do. That doesn't mean paranoia, it means accountability. It means imagining that someone is out there, seeing our triumphs and our failures, not to punish us, but to understand us. What would we want them to see? Our wars or our peace treaties? Our pollution or our clean energy revolutions? Our cruelty or our kindness? The power of the zoo hypothesis is that it turns the distant into the personal. It transforms the abstract concept of alien life into a motivational force. If someone is watching, let's give them something worth watching. Let's build art that stirs the soul. Let's solve problems once thought impossible. Let's treat each other with dignity. Not just for ourselves, but for whoever may be observing from the stars. Because even if we're alone, the attempt makes us better. And if we're not alone, well, we've just made our case. Final reflections, the zoo hypothesis as a call to evolution. In the end, the zoo hypothesis is less about aliens and more about us. It's about where we are in our cosmic journey. Are we infants in a crib, teenagers on the verge of self-destruction, or young adults slowly learning the responsibilities of our power? Whether aliens exist or not, the concept of being observed pushes us to evolve. Ethically, socially, technologically, it asks us to be aware of our actions not just in local terms, but in cosmic ones. It's a thought experiment, yes, but it's also a test of character. Because here's the great twist of the zoo hypothesis. If the watchers are real, they'll come when we're ready. If they're not real, we must become the watchers ourselves. Either way we grow, either way we reach. So, are aliens avoiding Earth? Maybe. Or maybe they're waiting. Not because we're unworthy, but because they believe in our potential. And maybe, just maybe, they're hoping we believe in it too. Breaking the glass, humanity's escape from the cosmic zoo. If Earth is a zoo, an enclosure crafted by alien hands, then what would it take to break the glass? Not through force, not through violence, but through evolution, through transformation. Emerging from the zoo, in the context of this hypothesis, means achieving a level of intelligence, cooperation, and maturity that signals to our potential watchers, we are ready, we understand, we belong. But what exactly would that transformation look like? It might begin with space. The more we expand outward, from the moon to Mars to the asteroid belt, the less we are confined to the single cradle of Earth. A civilization confined to one planet is vulnerable, but a multiplanetary species is harder to contain, harder to ignore. Colonizing other worlds, however, is not just about rockets and bases. It's about philosophy. It's about exporting our values, not just our bodies. What kind of society will we build on Mars? What ethics will guide our ventures into deep space? Will we repeat the mistakes of colonization, exploitation, and inequality, or will we create something new? Perhaps the aliens are watching to see how we answer those questions. Expanding into space also forces us to confront time. Missions take years, sometimes decades. Civilization must learn patience, planning, and long-term thinking, qualities that ancient extraterrestrial cultures likely mastered long ago. The moment we begin thinking on cosmic timescales, we change. We stop being animals reacting to instinct and start being architects of the future. That shift might be the real signal. The one that tells any hidden observers they're no longer animals. They're becoming ancestors. The silence between stars, interpreting the void. Still, a haunting question remains. What if there's no one watching? What if the zoo hypothesis is just a mirror we hold up to ourselves, a fiction born from loneliness? The silence between stars is heavy. Even as our telescopes become sharper and our probes travel farther, we have found no definitive signs of intelligent life. No signals, no structures, no cosmic breadcrumbs. This silence can feel like a void, like we're yelling into a canyon and hearing no echo. But silence doesn't mean absence. It could mean caution. It could mean waiting. Or perhaps it means we're early. Maybe we're the first to reach this stage of development. If so, the implications are staggering. If we are the first, then we are the seeders, the ones who must carry the torch of consciousness into the void. In that version of the story, the zoo hypothesis is flipped. We are the zookeepers of the future. We are the ones who will one day find primitive life on other planets and face the same decision. Do we watch silently or do we intervene? Will we repeat the mistakes of colonizers, or will we act with humility, care, and wisdom? Will we become the watchers we once imagined? The great turning point, from isolation to participation. Let's entertain a final thought. What if everything we've experienced as a species, our wars, our revolutions, our dreams and disasters, are simply the early chapters of a larger story? What if the silence, the mystery, the unproven possibilities of the zoo hypothesis are all just part of the waiting room before humanity's true role begins? There may come a moment, generations from now, when we receive a message, not a signal, not a language, but an event, something undeniable, a spacecraft, a visitation, a presence. Or perhaps we will reach out into the stars and find others who are waiting too. That moment, whenever it comes, will mark a turning point, the end of our isolation, the beginning of cosmic participation. It will be the day the glass wall of the zoo cracks, not with noise or conflict, but with understanding. And in that moment, we will realize something profound, that we were never prisoners. We were being prepared. The final lesson of the zoo hypothesis. As we reach the end of this journey, let's return to where we began. The question of why. Why would advanced aliens avoid us? Why watch but never speak? Perhaps the answer is as old as parenting, as ancient as guidance, because sometimes, to help someone grow, you must first let them struggle on their own. Imagine raising a child. You guide, but you do not control. You protect, but you do not smother. You step back, even when it hurts, so they can find their strength. Maybe the zoo hypothesis is not about isolation at all. Maybe it's about respect. Maybe the watchers, if they exist, are not keeping us out, but holding the door open, waiting for us to walk through it under our own power, waiting for us to become not the observed, but the observers. The zoo is ours to leave, The zoo hypothesis may never be proven. It may remain a philosophical lens, a way of making sense of the silence between stars. But even as a thought experiment, it offers us something powerful. It gives us a reason to strive, to become better, wiser, more united, more humane, to prepare not just for the possibility of contact, but for the certainty of legacy. Because in the end, whether we are being watched or not, we must act as if our story matters. Because it does. Conclusion: the cosmic mirror, humanity's choice in the silent observatory. The zoo hypothesis, for all its speculative nature, is far more than a simple answer to the Fermi paradox. It is a profound philosophical framework, a cosmic Rorschach test that reveals less about potential alien watchers and more about humanity's own anxieties, aspirations, and evolving self-perception. It transforms the vast, silent universe from an empty void into a potential amphitheater, with humanity on a stage we never knowingly built. Whether the audience is real or imagined, the hypothesis forces upon us a pivotal question. If we are being observed, what story are we performing? And if we are alone, what story do we choose to tell about ourselves? At its core, the hypothesis presents a radical shift in perspective. The unsettling silence of space is no longer a sign of our solitude or superiority, but potentially a mark of restraint, a galactic prime directive observed by civilizations so advanced that their ethics have evolved alongside their technology. This interpretation offers a comforting, if humbling, narrative. Our planetary conflicts, environmental crises, and social struggles are not ignored by the cosmos. They are, perhaps, being studied as the growing pains of an adolescent species. The occasional, unexplained UAP sighting becomes not a threat, but a subtle cue, a reminder that we are part of a larger context, a gentle nudge to look beyond our terrestrial squabbles and consider our cosmic maturity. This framework also provides a powerful lens through which to re-examine our entire history. Ancient myths of gods descending from the heavens, imparting knowledge, and then retreating are reframed not as primitive superstitions, but as possible cultural memories of early interventions or observational visits. The Watchers, in this light, are not a recent phenomenon, but a constant, subtle presence throughout our development. This connects the dots between the wheels within wheels of Ezekiel, the Vimanas of Hindu texts, and the modern-day encounters of military pilots, suggesting a consistent, if elusive, pattern of observation across millennia. The hypothesis doesn't demand belief in these events as literal truth, but it allows for a compelling continuity that challenges the conventional separation of ancient myth and modern science. The true power of the zoo hypothesis, however, lies in its function as a catalyst for human evolution. By proposing that we are being judged not by a punitive God, but by the cold, patient metrics of cosmic survivability, it instills a profound sense of responsibility. The test we are undergoing is not one of technological prowess, but of ethical and social maturity. Can we unite as a global species? Can we steward our planet rather than consume it? Can we overcome the tribal impulses of fear and aggression? These are the criteria for graduation from the cosmic zoo. In this sense, the hypothesis becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of improvement. The mere act of considering it pushes us to become the wiser, more unified civilization that would be worthy of contact. This leads to the most empowering interpretation. The Watchers, whether real or not, represent our own future potential. The zoo hypothesis holds up a mirror to humanity, reflecting both our primitive flaws and our transcendent possibilities. Our desire to be observed stems from a deep-seated need for validation, to know that our struggle for meaning is witnessed and significant. Yet, the ultimate goal is not to remain the observed, but to become the observers. As we develop our own technologies to scan exoplanets for signs of life, we are already stepping into the role we ascribe to the aliens. We are learning the ethics of observation, the patience required for interstellar timescales, and the humility of realizing that we may soon be the advanced beings faced with the decision of whether to make contact with a younger, less developed world. Therefore, the greatest lesson of the zoo hypothesis is that the glass enclosure is not a prison built by others, but one of our own making, constructed from the limitations of nationalism, short-term thinking, and self-destructive tendencies. Breaking free is not about spotting an alien ship, but about shattering these internal barriers. It is about evolving into a species that thinks in planetary and cosmic terms, that values cooperation over conflict, and that views its intelligence as a tool for stewardship rather than domination. In the final analysis, the question of whether the zoo hypothesis is literally true may be less important than the transformative effect of entertaining it. It provides a narrative of hope and purpose in the face of cosmic silence. It suggests that we are not abandoned, but are in a period of incubation. The silence is not a verdict, but a challenge. The watchers are not our jailers, but potential mentors waiting for us to reach a hand out first. So, let us act as if the hypothesis is true. Let us strive to make humanity a spectacle worth watching, not a violent drama of self-destruction, but an inspiring story of a species learning to heal its world, embrace its diversity, and reach for the stars with wisdom and wonder. For when we do that, we achieve the ultimate goal. We cease to be mere inhabitants of the zoo and become its curators. We transition from the subjects of observation to the conscious participants in a cosmic community. The silence will then be broken, not by a signal from afar, but by the sound of our own collective maturity, a maturity that announces, to any who may be listening, that humanity is finally ready to join the conversation of the cosmos. The moment we accept that possibility, whether as literal truth or as a useful lens, we step into a different kind of responsibility, not the responsibility of proving aliens exist, or decoding an impossible signal, or winning some cosmic audition with a flashy new engine. A quieter responsibility, one that lives in the decisions we make when no one is applauding, in the way we treat a world that cannot speak back, in the way we treat one another when we think no higher eyes are watching. Because that's the hidden sting in the zoo hypothesis. It doesn't let us off the hook. If there are watchers, then we are being measured, not by our stories about ourselves, but by what we actually do. And if there aren't watchers, then the measurement still stands. The universe may not be judging us, but reality is, biology is, physics is, time is. Civilizations either learn to endure or they burn bright and disappear. The zoo hypothesis then becomes a kind of moral technology, an imagined presence that pressures us toward a real evolution. The threshold problem, what ready might mean. Humans tend to define readiness in human terms. We imagine the day we build a warp drive, the day we land on Europa, the day we crack room temperature superconductors, the day we can beam a message with enough power to be heard across the galaxy. We imagine readiness as a switch flipped by engineering. But the zoo hypothesis implies the opposite. It implies that advanced civilizations don't care if we can build bigger rockets. They care if we can handle what bigger rockets make possible. Because rockets are simple. Power is easy. The hard part is what comes after power. So what would a civilization actually watch for? Not whether we can split the atom, we already can. Not whether we can reach orbit, we already have. Not whether we can send probes into interstellar space, we already are. The threshold might be something more subtle, something that doesn't show up on a tech tree, something that can't be measured in gigawatts. It might be a stability threshold. A species that discovers world-ending tools before it develops world-saving ethics is a species that risks self-erasure. And if the universe is filled with the ruins of civilizations that reached that stage and failed, then the non-interference policy starts to look less like cruelty and more like triage. The watchers might not be asking, are they smart? They might be asking, are they safe? Safe for themselves, safe for their planet, safe for anyone else unlucky enough to share a neighborhood with them. A planet that can't keep from poisoning its water supply doesn't look like a future partner. It looks like a warning label. A civilization that cannot cooperate globally, even when faced with obvious threats, doesn't look like a future community member. It looks like a virus still learning what it is. The threshold might be coherence, the ability to act as a single species when it matters. Not a utopia, not perfect unity, just basic coherence. The ability to stop a war instead of escalating it. The ability to share medical breakthroughs instead of hoarding them. The ability to treat the biosphere as an inheritance, not a mine. The ability to create intelligence, artificial or otherwise, without building a god and praying it doesn't hate us. If you were watching from above, those would be the signs you'd look for. Not because you're moralizing, because you've seen the pattern before. The ethics of observation, why the watchers might stay silent. People often assume that if aliens are here, they should announce themselves. That silence is suspicious, that secrecy is hostile, but that assumption is deeply human, specifically, deeply colonial. We are a species with a long history of contact, and our contact stories are rarely gentle. When a technologically superior group meets a less advanced one, the result is often not enlightenment. It is disruption, disease, exploitation, cultural collapse, dependence, trauma. We can't ignore this, not if we're being honest. If the Watchers are advanced, then they have likely run the same moral simulation we've run in our own history, just with higher stakes and longer timelines. They know what happens when you land in someone's world and declare yourself a god, even accidentally. They know what happens when you gift technology to a culture that hasn't built the social immune system to handle it. They know what happens when a developing species externalizes its agency, when it stops believing it can solve its problems because a higher intelligence might step in. Silence then becomes a form of respect. It becomes restraint. A parent does not solve every problem for a child, not because the parent is indifferent, but because constant rescue destroys competence. It creates dependency. It creates fragility. And perhaps this is the darkest twist. Perhaps the Watchers have learned that intervention almost always backfires. Perhaps the reason the galaxy is quiet is not because no one is speaking, but because everyone who ever tried regretted it. The zoo hypothesis isn't just they're watching, it's they've learned to watch without touching. The signal we keep missing, contact beyond radio. We love the romance of radio, a beam of numbers from a distant star, a repeating pulse, a mathematical handshake, the universe speaking in primes. But radio might be the cosmic equivalent of banging rocks together. It worked for us because it was the first thing we could do, but that doesn't mean it's what advanced civilizations still use. We assume alien communication will look like ours because we have no other reference point. We look for the familiar, we build antennas, we listen for noise shaped into patterns. We search for signals that look like intelligence from a human perspective. But what if the real conversation is happening in a medium we don't even understand? Quantum entanglement. If it can be harnessed as more than a laboratory oddity, neutrinos, ghost particles that pass through planets like their air, gravitational waves, ripples in space-time itself, or something stranger still, information encoded in physics so subtly that it looks like nature unless you know what to look for. We might be surrounded by messages and not recognize them as messages, the way an ant might be surrounded by books and not recognize them as language. This is where the zoo hypothesis becomes especially eerie, because it suggests that the Watchers are not only silent, they are silent in a way that protects their silence. Their communication might be deliberately camouflaged, hidden inside the background of the universe so that only civilizations past a certain threshold can detect it, not as a barrier built to exclude us, but as a filter that prevents immature species from stumbling into dangerous knowledge, a cosmic child lock. And if that is true, then SETI might be like a toddler holding a toy phone, listening hard and declaring the universe empty. The Great Filter and the Zoo, a dark compatibility. No discussion of cosmic silence lasts long before the Great Filter appears. The idea that somewhere between lifeless matter and spacefaring intelligence lies a barrier so deadly that most civilizations never cross it. The zoo hypothesis and the Great Filter fit together in a way that is both elegant and terrifying. Because the zoo hypothesis explains why there are no obvious neighbors, the Great Filter explains why there might be no survivors, or why the survivors are so cautious. If the Watchers exist, they may be the ones who cross the filter. And what do survivors do? They become careful. They become quiet. They become interested in young worlds like ours, not out of sentimentality, but out of grim curiosity. Will they make it? The zoo hypothesis in this light isn't cute. It isn't romantic. It's a set of safety protocols written in the blood of extinct civilizations. And that changes everything, because it means we are not being watched by gods. We are being watched by survivors. The rule of non-interference. A galactic agreement? One of the most unsettling implications of the zoo hypothesis is coordination. It's not just that one civilization is choosing to ignore us, it's that many might be. Because silence is hard to maintain if you have rivals, factions, splinter groups, opportunists. If Earth is truly being left alone, that suggests a broader norm, a shared rule, a cultural taboo, a treaty. Maybe advanced civilizations have a standard principle: do not contact pre-threshold worlds. Not because of compassion, necessarily, but because contact creates problems. It could trigger wars. It could destabilize developing cultures. It could invite exploitation. It could spread technology that should not spread. Or it could spread something else: a pathogen, a self-replicating machine, a mimetic hazard, an idea so contagious and destructive it can collapse civilizations. Maybe the prime directive isn't fiction. Maybe it's the minimum standard required for a civilization to survive long enough to join the interstellar community. And if that's the case, then the Watchers aren't just hiding from us, they're protecting each other from us. UAPs revisited: why soft contact would be the perfect strategy. If open contact is forbidden or dangerous, then why allow any hints at all? Why allow UAP sightings? Why allow glimpses, radar blips, the occasional impossible maneuver? Because total silence has a problem. It doesn't prepare the mind. A civilization like ours doesn't handle reality shocks well. We fracture, we mythologize, we weaponize uncertainty, we turn mysteries into cults, conspiracies, dogmas, wars. Soft contact, then, could be a kind of psychological conditioning, not enough to confirm, not enough to unify, not enough to collapse religions overnight or send markets into panic or trigger global militarization, just enough to introduce a concept into the collective imagination. There might be something else, a slow drip, a careful acclimation, because when the day finally comes, if it comes, the shock will be less violent if the idea has been present for generations. This would also explain why the phenomenon is so frustratingly ambiguous. Because ambiguity is the point. Definitive proof forces immediate societal response. Ambiguity allows gradual cultural adaptation. Soft contact is not about revealing themselves. It's about shaping us, not by giving instructions, but by introducing a question that cannot be unasked. If governments know the burden of managing the unmanageable, now we arrive at the most volatile part of this territory, the possibility that governments know more than they admit. Even without conspiracies, even without secret treaties, even without crashed craft and shadow programs, it's possible that militaries have encountered something they cannot explain and chosen, for rational reasons, to control the narrative. Because the truth, whatever it is, doesn't behave like other truths. If a foreign nation has a new aircraft, you can respond strategically. If a natural phenomenon is misunderstood, you can study it. But if something is operating in your airspace with capabilities you can't match and motives you can't read, you are no longer in control of the story. And if the story escapes, it metastasizes. It becomes a religion. It becomes panic. It becomes a political weapon. It becomes a marketplace of lies. So governments might remain quiet not because they're villains, but because they have no script for how to speak honestly about something they do not understand. And within the zoo hypothesis framework, secrecy becomes even more plausible, because secrecy may itself be part of the non-interference ethic. If the Watchers don't want open contact, then any government that becomes aware of them may find itself in a strange position, obeying rules it didn't negotiate. Imagine that. Imagine learning you're being observed by a civilization that can cross interstellar distances and realizing you are not the most powerful actor on your own planet. How do you admit that? How do you maintain order when your authority is suddenly revealed as local, fragile, provisional? If there is a back channel, it would likely not be a dramatic face-to-face meeting. It would be constraints, boundaries, warnings delivered in ways that cannot be misconstrued. A closed door you're allowed to see, but not allowed to open. The cultural fallout. What contact would do to the human story. Even if contact is gentle, even if it's peaceful, even if it's slow, it would still transform everything, because humanity is built on stories about humanity. We tell ourselves where we came from, why we matter, what history means, what we owe each other, what death means, what the universe is for. Alien confirmation, just the confirmation, not even the details, would rearrange those stories like a tectonic shift. Some people would feel liberated. We are not alone. the universe is alive, meaning is bigger than our planet. Others would feel betrayed. Our religions, our myths, our hierarchies, what are they now? Some governments would try to claim control. We speak for Earth. Some movements would reject the entire premise: propaganda, deception, demons, illusions. Some would worship, some would rage, some would exploit it for money, some would weaponize it for power, and somewhere in the middle, the majority would do what humans always do with reality-shattering information: adapt, normalize, compartmentalize. The first weeks would be chaos. The first months would be argument. The first years would be a new era. This is why the Watchers would be careful, not because they fear us, because they understand us. The mirror test: how we treat the other before we meet the other. If there is a test embedded in the zoo hypothesis, it might be simpler than we think. Not a cosmic exam with hidden questions. A mirror test: how do we treat intelligent beings that are weaker than us? That question is not hypothetical. We already face it every day. We face it in how we treat animals, in how we treat marginalized humans, in how we treat rival nations, in how we treat ecosystems, in how we treat minds that think differently. If we cannot coexist with ourselves, if we cannot grant dignity to beings that share our planet, then what promise do we have of coexisting with minds born under alien suns? This might be the real reason for the silence, because contact is not a technological event, it is a moral event, and we are still learning basic moral literacy. The hidden audience, the psychological pressure of being observed. There's another layer here, one more intimate, more unsettling. If we truly believed we were being watched, how would it change us? It might inspire our best selves, or it might unleash our worst. There's a reason humans behave differently when they think they're observed. Surveillance alters ethics. It produces performative virtue. It creates fear. It creates compliance. It creates rebellion. It creates distortion. If the zoo hypothesis became widely accepted, not as speculation, but as felt reality, human culture might shift dramatically. We might become obsessed with appearing worthy, crafting a planetary mask to impress an unseen judge. We might create global rituals, broadcasted performances, messages aimed at the sky. We might attempt to signal maturity in ways that are actually childish. Grand displays of unity that hide exploitation beneath the surface. And the Watchers, if they exist, would see through that immediately. You cannot fake maturity to a civilization that has watched 1,000 worlds try. That's another brutal implication. The test, if it exists, cannot be gamed, it can only be lived. The exit condition: what could breaking the glass actually be? The phrase breaking the glass is seductive. It suggests a dramatic moment, an escape, a revelation, a door opening. But the zoo hypothesis implies that the glass is not physical, it's informational, it's ethical, it's developmental. So what would breaking it look like? It might look like us detecting the hidden channel of communication, finally building instruments sensitive enough to perceive the conversation. It might look like us becoming spacefaring in a real way, not just visiting nearby worlds, but building sustainable off-world civilizations. It might look like us solving our internal contradictions, building systems that reward cooperation, not predation. It might look like us surviving our first self-made existential threats: nuclear weapons, engineered pandemics, runaway AI, biosphere collapse. It might look like time, because sometimes the simplest answer is the most humbling. The Watchers are waiting for us to grow up, and growth takes longer than a few centuries. We are still a young species wearing the clothes of a god we stole from physics. We have the tools of adulthood and the impulses of a teenager. Breaking the glass might simply mean becoming older, not in years, but in wisdom. The possibility no one likes. Maybe we're being quarantined. There is a darker version of the zoo hypothesis that people rarely admit out loud. Maybe we're not being preserved. Maybe we're being contained. Maybe Earth is not a reserve. Maybe it's a quarantine. A species with a history of aggression, exponential replication, and the development of dangerous technology might be treated the way we treat invasive species. Observed, monitored, restricted, not because it's evil, because it's unpredictable. This would explain the "leave us alone" decision in a different way. Not as benevolence, as caution. Perhaps the Watchers have watched us long enough to conclude, not yet, not safe, not stable. So they keep their distance, they minimize contact, they ensure we don't contaminate the wider ecosystem. This interpretation is humiliating. It is also, in a cold way, plausible. And yet, even here, there is still a path forward. Quarantine ends when the infection is contained, when behavior changes, when the risk drops, when the patient proves capable of self-regulation. If Earth is quarantined, then the cure is not a weapon, it's maturity. The strange hope, the Watchers might be rooting for us. For all the dread embedded in this hypothesis, it carries a peculiar form of hope, because watching is not the same as ignoring. Watching is attention. Attention is investment, and investment implies interest. Even if the Watchers are cautious, even if they are bound by rules, even if they have chosen silence, the mere act of observing suggests they haven't written us off. They haven't turned away. They haven't declared us a dead end. They are still looking, still measuring, still waiting. If they exist, then somewhere beyond our comprehension, there may be minds that have seen us struggle through ice ages, through plagues, through wars, through the birth of art and language and science. Minds that have watched us crawl out of ignorance again and again. Minds that have witnessed the first time our species looked up and wondered. If there is any empathy in the universe, and it would be strange if intelligence evolved without any form of it, then those minds may feel something when they watch us. Not sentimentality, not love in the human sense, but recognition, a memory of their own infancy, a familiarity with the chaos of becoming, and perhaps that's why they keep the door open. The final twist, even if it's wrong, it still works. Here is the quiet genius of the zoo hypothesis as a story we tell ourselves. Even if it's false, it still functions. If the Watchers aren't real, acting as if they are still improves us. It still pushes us toward unity. It still pressures us toward stewardship. It still frames our self-destruction as something not inevitable, not normal, but shameful. An avoidable failure in the presence of a larger cosmos. In other words, the hypothesis is useful even as a myth, not because it's comforting, because it's demanding. It asks us to behave as if we are part of something bigger. And whether or not that something exists, behaving that way is how civilizations survive. The silent observatory, the choice that defines us. So we return again to the same crossroads, a universe old enough for countless civilizations, a galaxy packed with worlds, a silence that could mean emptiness or restraint, a hypothesis that suggests we are surrounded, observed, assessed, deliberately left alone. And now, the only question that matters, what do we do with that possibility? Do we use it as a reason to despair? Do we use it as fuel for paranoia? Do we turn it into another myth we weaponize against each other? Or do we let it become what it can be at its best, a call to grow up? Because if we are in a zoo, then the exhibit is not our bodies. It is our character. It is our choices. It is the trajectory of a species that has learned to split atoms but not yet learned to share a planet. And if there is a door, if there is a threshold, if there is a moment when the Watchers decide the experiment can enter a new phase, then that moment will not be triggered by our cleverness. It will be triggered by our restraint, our cooperation, our care, our ability to hold power without turning it into a weapon. The zoo hypothesis doesn't end with aliens. It ends with us, with what we decide to become while the sky remains quiet. Because silence is not a void, it is a space, and in that space, humanity writes its answer, not to the universe, not to the Watchers, to itself. And if that answer is ugly, if it is small, selfish, violent, careless, then the silence will remain, not as punishment, but as consequence. A door doesn't open for a species that would kick it off its hinges. A community doesn't invite a civilization that still thinks dominance is the same thing as strength. A Watcher doesn't step into the cage if the creature inside has not yet learned what it means to stop clawing at everything it touches. But if the answer is different, if it is wiser, steadier, more deliberate, then the quiet may change. Not suddenly, not with trumpets, not with a fleet on the horizon. It may change the way dawn changes, so slowly you don't notice the exact moment night stops being night. Because if the zoo hypothesis is true, the Watchers don't deal in drama. They deal in thresholds. They deal in patience. They deal in time. The first rule of the zoo: you don't know you're in it. That is the most unsettling part. Not that we might be observed, not even that we might be contained, but that, if this is real, the system is designed so that we cannot be certain. Certainty would alter the experiment. Certainty would collapse the natural behavior the Watchers want to understand. A zoo animal that knows it is being watched behaves differently. It performs. It adapts to the gaze. It becomes a response to observation instead of a creature living its own life. So the most elegant enclosure is one the subject cannot detect. No walls, no bars, no obvious guards, just a boundary enforced by physics, distance, and our own limitations. We look outward and see emptiness. And in that emptiness, we feel alone. And in that loneliness, we behave exactly as a young civilization behaves. We fight, we build, we dream, we self-destruct, we recover, we reach again. And above it all, perhaps, an audience sits in a silence we can't pierce, watching the only thing that interests them. What do we do when we think no one is watching? The second rule: the Watchers don't have to look like Watchers. People imagine Watchers as ships in the sky, gray bodies behind black glass, cold eyes studying charts. But a civilization capable of interstellar travel, or of something beyond it, doesn't need to hover over cities to observe. Observation can be subtle. Observation can be distributed. Observation can be invisible. They could be here in machines no larger than dust motes, drifting through our atmosphere, listening to the electromagnetic hum of our civilization like a doctor listens to a heartbeat. They could be in the deep ocean, where our eyes rarely go and our presence is thin, a place we still treat like a dumping ground because it feels infinite when it is not. They could be in orbit, silent as stone, designed to be mistaken for debris or natural objects. A perfect camouflage, look like nothing. Or they could be farther away than we assume, not near Earth at all, watching through instruments so advanced that distance is irrelevant, using telescopes that drink in information the way our minds drink in light. And if their understanding of physics is deeper than ours, they might not even need instruments. They might read planets the way we read weather. A civilization is not just buildings and broadcasts. It is heat patterns, night lights, atmospheric chemistry, the chemical signatures of industry and agriculture, the unnatural rhythms of energy consumption, the subtle anomalies of a world that has begun to reshape itself. From far enough away, Earth has been loud for a while. Our planet glows differently than it did before. We are a signal whether we intend to be or not, which means that if Watchers exist, the question is not whether they can find us. The question is whether they choose to acknowledge us. The third rule: silence is a tool. We treat silence like absence because we are afraid of it. But silence can be an instrument. It can shape behavior. It can reveal character. When you don't intervene, you discover what a system does on its own. You discover whether it collapses without guidance. You discover whether it can correct itself. You discover whether its intelligence is stable or just cleverness with no restraint. Silence forces a species to develop its own internal answers. Because if the Watchers spoke too soon, we would anchor our meaning to them. We would turn them into gods or devils. We would build our politics around them. We would beg for their solutions and curse them for their refusal. We would become dependent, spiritually, culturally, technologically. And dependency is a kind of death, a slower death, but a real one. A civilization that cannot stand on its own is not a civilization. It is a client, a pet, a project. So perhaps the Watchers stay quiet because they have learned that the greatest gift you can give to a developing species is the chance to become itself, not a copy, not a subordinate, not a satellite culture orbiting a greater mind, but a distinct voice in the cosmic choir, and distinct voices must grow alone before they can harmonize. The terrible question: what if the zoo isn't benevolent? There is another interpretation that fits just as neatly into the shape of the silence. One that doesn't feel like parenting, one that feels like predation. Because we can't pretend the universe owes us kindness. If we are being watched, it does not automatically mean we are being protected. A zoo can be a sanctuary. A zoo can also be a pantry. The most frightening version of the zoo hypothesis is not that we are preserved. It is that we are cultivated, that we are being allowed to develop because development makes us more valuable, more interesting, more useful, more profitable, more edible in ways we cannot even define. This sounds like paranoia, and it might be. But paranoia is just imagination under pressure, and pressure is what the cosmos applies when you stare into it too long. If an advanced intelligence wanted resources, it wouldn't need to wait. It could take what it wants without asking. Our defenses are a joke against interstellar capability, so if it hasn't taken anything, the simplest explanation isn't that it can't. It's that it doesn't want to. Not yet. And that not yet is the part that crawls under the skin. Because not yet implies timing, it implies planning, it implies that our timeline might not be ours alone. But even here, there's a counterpoint. A different fear that is, in its own way, even worse. What if they're not waiting to harvest us? What if they're waiting to see if we'll harvest ourselves? Because that is what young civilizations do. They consume their own planet. They exhaust their own ecosystems. They weaponize their own intelligence. They produce technologies that outrun their ethics. They become the architects of their own extinction. And if watchers have seen this 1,000 times, perhaps they don't need to intervene. The pattern resolves itself. The exhibit ends when the species collapses. The lights go out. A new experiment begins somewhere else. The dark forest shadow. There is a cousin to the zoo hypothesis that haunts it like a shadow. The dark forest idea, the notion that the universe is quiet because everyone is hiding, because revealing your location is dangerous. In a dark forest, every civilization is a hunter. Every signal is a risk. Every light is a target. The zoo hypothesis, by contrast, suggests quiet for ethical reasons. But what if both are true? What if the watchers are silent not only out of restraint, but out of fear? Not fear of us, specifically. Fear of what else is out there. In that version, Earth isn't just an exhibit. It's a blind spot, a place kept quiet, because broadcasting our presence could attract something worse. And the watchers, rather than being zookeepers, become wardens, not of us, but of the boundary between us and whatever lurks beyond it. This is where the hypothesis becomes almost unbearable, because it reframes the silence as protection from a universe we are not ready to understand, and it suggests that our loudness, our radio leakage, our attempts to shout into the void might not be brave. It might be reckless. If you don't know what lives in the forest, you don't scream your location. Maybe that's why the watchers let us hear only static, because the static is safer than an answer. The signal that matters. What we broadcast without meaning to. When people imagine contact, they imagine messages deliberately sent, a greeting, a warning, an invitation. But if watchers exist, they don't need our invitations. They already receive our unintended transmissions, the real ones, not our radio chatter, not our TV. Those are noise, cultural fog. The real signal is what our civilization does at scale. It is how quickly we adapt to threats. It is whether we can coordinate without coercion. It is whether our scientific progress is matched by our moral progress. It is whether we treat intelligence as a sacred responsibility or as a tool for domination. And in recent years, we've begun broadcasting a new signal, one that might matter more than anything else we've ever done. We are building minds, not metaphorically, literally. We are creating systems that can mimic thought, generate language, make decisions, learn patterns, optimize goals. We are building something that resembles intelligence, and we are doing it inside a species that still hasn't learned how to share a planet without violence. If there is a cosmic test, this might be the moment the watchers care about most, because a species that creates a new intelligence becomes something else. It becomes a civilization capable of birthing successors, and that ability is either the beginning of maturity or the beginning of the end. If we create minds we cannot align with our values, if we create powers we cannot control, then our story may not reach the stars. It may end in a quiet room, on a quiet planet, under a quiet sky, with no one to witness it but the silent audience that never intervenes. Or perhaps the watchers intervene only here, only at this moment, not with ships, not with messages, but with constraint. an invisible boundary that prevents a certain kind of technology from crossing a certain line. We wouldn't know. We would simply find that some paths never open, no matter how close we get, and we would call it bad luck. The most human mistake, assuming we'd recognize them. We keep imagining that if aliens are here, we would notice. But history is filled with humans failing to recognize other humans, failing to recognize danger, failing to recognize patterns, failing to recognize what was happening until it was too late. We are not good at interpreting signals outside our expectation set. We see faces in clouds. We miss obvious threats. We deny reality when it threatens our worldview. So if watchers exist, and if they are advanced, then the odds that we would recognize their presence are not high. Their technology might look like natural phenomena. Their craft, if they even use craft, might look like anomalies. Their communication might look like cosmic background noise. Their interventions might look like coincidence. And if they wanted to remain unseen, remaining unseen would be easy. We can barely monitor our own oceans. We can barely agree on basic truths. We can barely keep track of the objects we ourselves have put into orbit. Against that backdrop, the idea that we'd catch a civilization millions of years ahead of us is almost arrogant. The zoo hypothesis, at its core, is not just about alien ethics. It is about human humility. The gradual reveal. If contact happens, it won't be what we expect. Humans love endings. We love climaxes. We love the dramatic moment when everything changes. A ship lands, a voice speaks. History splits into before and after, but the universe doesn't do endings the way we do. It does processes, it does long arcs, it does slow transformations that only look sudden in hindsight. If the watchers decide we are ready, the reveal might not be a spectacle. It might be a shift in access, a pattern we finally decipher, a new signal that becomes visible only when our instruments reach a threshold, a door that was always there, unlocked only when our hands become steady enough to turn the handle. And even then it might not be, hello. It might be a test of comprehension, a puzzle, a structure, a proof, something designed not to impress us, but to evaluate whether we can understand without panicking, whether we can learn without worshiping, whether we can encounter the unknown without turning it into a weapon, because that is the real risk of contact, not that they harm us, that we harm ourselves. The two civilizations inside humanity. If watchers are evaluating us, they are not evaluating our smartest minds in isolation. They are evaluating what we do as a whole, and as a whole, humanity contains two civilizations at once. One civilization builds hospitals, writes symphonies, cures diseases, maps the cosmos, fights for justice, risks itself for strangers, imagines better futures. The other builds propaganda, fuels hatred, exploits the weak, burns ecosystems, hoards resources, worships power, and treats the future like a disposable thing. Both are real. Both are us. We are capable of extraordinary compassion and extraordinary cruelty, often in the same breath. So what do the watchers see? Do they see a species rising or a species fracturing? Do they see a civilization capable of joining a community, or a civilization that would import its violence into the stars? And here is the uncomfortable truth. We are currently writing the answer, not with our opinions, not with our theories, with our behavior. The zoo as a moral mirror. What it forces us to admit. The zoo hypothesis doesn't just ask, are we alone? It asks, if we aren't alone, what does that say about us? Because the moment you imagine being watched, you begin to see yourself differently. You begin to notice your own contradictions, your own excuses, your own smallness. You begin to realize that the reasons you can't imagine aliens contacting us might be the same reasons we struggle to contact each other meaningfully across our own divides. We are noisy, but not coherent. We are connected, but not united. We are informed, but not wise. We are powerful, but not mature. And the hypothesis does something brutal and useful. It externalizes accountability. It tells us there might be a witness. And even if there isn't, it forces us to behave as if there should be. The unseen countdown. The window. We might not realize we're in. There is another possibility people rarely consider. Not that contact is forbidden forever, not that it is waiting for perfection, but that it has a window. A civilization like ours might have a limited period during which it is observable in a certain way, leaking radio, burning fossil fuels, radiating industrial heat. Then it either matures into a cleaner, quieter state, or it collapses. That means watchers might see many worlds flicker into visibility, then vanish. A brief flare of intelligence, then silence again. If that's the pattern, then watchers might pay special attention to civilizations in this window, because the window closes quickly on cosmic timescales. And we are in it now. We are visible. We are loud. We are dangerous to ourselves. We are also capable of transformation, which means, if this is a zoo, this is not a static exhibit. It's a live experiment at a critical stage. And the watchers might not be waiting for us to invent something. They might be waiting for us to choose something. The choice that changes everything, because ultimately, the zoo hypothesis reduces to a simple fork in the road. Do we become a species that can carry intelligence forward, or do we become a cautionary tale? Do we learn that survival is not a right, but an achievement? Do we learn that power without restraint is a dead end? Do we learn that the future is not something we inherit? It's something we build, moment by moment, decision by decision. If there are watchers, they will not be impressed by our skyscrapers. They will be impressed if we stop collapsing our own ecosystems. They will not be impressed by our weapons. They will be impressed if we learn to solve conflict without blood. They will not be impressed by our claims of greatness. They will be impressed if we treat life, human and non-human, as something more than a resource. And if we do that, the most remarkable thing might happen, not because we earned a prize, but because we finally became the kind of species that doesn't need one. And then, maybe, the static changes. Maybe one night, an array tuned to the right frequency at the right sensitivity catches something that doesn't behave like noise, not a scream, not a broadcast, a pattern. A structure that only becomes obvious when your mind is ready to see structure where you used to see chaos. A message so simple, it's almost insulting. Not a prophecy, not a revelation, just confirmation. A line drawn in the darkness to show that someone else has been drawing lines too. And the message might not even be addressed to us as individuals. It might be addressed to a civilization that has finally begun to act like a civilization. It might not say welcome. It might say something colder, something truer, something that doesn't flatter us, something like, "We see you, we have always seen you. Now show us what you will become." And then the universe would not feel empty anymore, not because it suddenly filled with voices, but because we finally understood that it never needed to. Because the silence was never the absence of life, it was the presence of restraint. And whether that restraint was benevolent, cautious, fearful, or indifferent, it leaves us with the same final reality. The zoo is ours to leave, but only when we stop behaving like animals trapped in a cage of our own making. Only when we become the kind of intelligence that can step into the dark forest without screaming. Only when we learn that being watched is not the point, becoming worthy of watching is. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.